Hey Raghunath, tell everyone about our Patreon community.
Sure, Kaustubha. The Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is an incredible online yoga resource. If you like the type of yoga wisdom and culture we share on the show, then our Patreon community is a great next step. This is a listener-supported podcast, and any level of sponsorship will unlock a wide range of live and archived classes, talks, and even workshops.
Raghunath teaches, I teach, and we have a host of other excellent teachers on topics ranging from yoga philosophy, asana classes, storytelling, Ayurveda, kirtan, cooking, meditation, and a lot more.
We even have an incredible online Bhakti 12-step recovery group.
So if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/Wisdom of the Sages.
All right, let's get it on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
And we'll say, welcome to Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast, with our host, Raghunath, who's having a little bit of internet problem right now, but hopefully we'll be back with you in a second, and me, Kaustubha. And, today's our question and answer day. We do it every Saturday, but because Raghunath's having the Super Soul Save-A weekend up there at the Super Soul Farm, we didn't have the show yesterday, and we moved the questions over to today. And so we're trying to get Raghunath back, and hopefully he'll be back any minute now. But we have questions and answers, so we figured maybe until we get him back, Mara could read a question to me, and I can get it started, and I'll get us going. And hopefully he'll be back soon.
Sure. So the first question is from Devaki in Berlin.
Okay, Devaki.
Yeah, she listens every day. She's an other, though.
All right.
She writes, I am a daily other, and I listen to Wisdom of the Sages every day while commuting to university. I was born in a loving devotee family and community, and I attended regular high school. But after graduating, I decided to move into an ashram and served there for almost a year. From the temple life, I moved to Berlin to study acting. You can imagine the culture shock. I'm now 20 and trying to keep a steady sadhana and associate with devotees as much as possible, despite the challenges of these times. I also share my lifestyle and philosophy with my classmates when asked about it, and they generally are very interested and supportive. However, one thing they sometimes tease me with is the idea of me being morally correct, because I don't drink, go to parties, and try to be politically neutral and positive. In Bhakti, I never thought of us as being necessarily morally oriented people or a morally defending culture. Instead, that we try and live in the mode of goodness to later transcend it. I mean, the gopis left everything for Krishna, talk about morally incorrect. Yet they are our highest objects of esteem. So could you please help me understand the Bhakti Yoga's relationship with morality? Also, could you maybe give some encouragement on how to deal with my friends in a way that they don't think of me as a fanatic or weirdo, but still stay true to myself and my belief that Krishna consciousness is the most fun, deep, worthwhile commitment one can enter into. I'm so extremely grateful for your daily association and your inspiring service. Please never stop. People like me need you.
Oh, well, thank you, Devaki. And we got Raghunath back. Raghunath, can you hear me? Come in, Raghunath. Where is he? I thought he was something. There he is. He needs to be unmuted. And he should be back any second now. Okay, but I'll go ahead and get started with this. And Mara, maybe you could make sure that Raghunath, I'm asking him to unmute, but he's not unmuting. So you could, is that him? Okay. So, Devaki, what a nice question. And I will do my best to try to help. So she's asking about the relation between morality and the practice of Bhakti Yoga. And then also in how it relates to how she relates with her friends who aren't practicing Bhakti. And so, morality, it means, we have certain principles that we use to distinguish what is right or wrong, or you could say what is, valuable or what is not valuable, what we want to keep and what we want to get rid of. And, everybody needs that in life, so whoever we are, we need to have some kind of conception of morality. I think what's common, what I get from her question is kind of, I think we may equate like what we could call them, how Judeo-Christian morality manifests in this world. And someone may feel like that is contrary to like conceptions of freedom. Like, in other words, my guess is what's coming from her friends is the idea that, religion places these kind of like binding ideas of morality on us, and it makes us inhibited. It makes us unable to act in a relaxed and natural way and enjoy life and have fun. And so it's kind of like, although there's like, maybe it's teasing from her friends because they're her friends, but maybe that there's a little grain of truth in that teasing, that they're saying, you seem to be inhibited. You don't have fun the way that the rest of us do. And why would you want to live life that way? Why would you want to restrict your freedom? Maybe you could be more free like us. And, one of the things, and we've spoken about this on the show before, but one of the things I really appreciate about the yoga culture is really what it's showing is, or let's put it this way. You could take Judeo-Christian morality, or whatever, however people conceive of that. Let's say that kind of negative conception of it, that it's inhibiting and restrictive and maybe even arbitrary, like what you can and can't do is just like kind of dictated without any good reason. And then you can say that that's, on the opposite side of freedom. And if I have to choose between the two, well, I'll take freedom. But really the way that the yogi looks at it is not like, it's not a question between freedom and religion, but what you have is a false conception of freedom versus a true conception of freedom, which you could call yoga, right? Because from the yoga perspective, the idea is that people are walking around thinking they're free. People are walking around thinking they're uninhibited, but really their mind's dictating what they do and how they act, and confusing them about where they'll find real happiness. So most people, from the yogi's perspective, are following the dictations of the mind. And yoga is a path to freedom where I'm no longer inhibited or controlled by my mind. And so really that's what we're trying to practice. And when you want to do that, it means that you adopt certain self-disciplines. It's not like it's some religious imposition, but it's more like, if my goal is to become free of my mind, I need to work on controlling my own mind. And so what you call my morality is really, from my perspective, that's my path to freedom. My like well-developed, clearly thought out path to freedom. And so I adopt certain self-disciplines to gain control of the mind. And when you look at it, like really inner question, what it came out like, oh, you don't party or you don't drink. But let's really look at that. It's like, is like drinking alcohol something that I've do because I choose to be free and I find it fun and enjoyable, and so this is like a positive thing? Or can I look at it from another perspective and say, actually, by drinking that alcohol, what I'm doing is limiting my freedom, And so, Raghu, are you around here?
Yeah.
Okay, there he is. Because you're like a straight edge acharya. You've thought a lot about this subject, right? Like for instance, alcohol, right?
It's a freedom stealer. Freedom stealer.
It's a freedom stealer, right? I looked it up. Like, what is the effect of alcohol on the brain, right? Did a little research.
Let's hear it, Professor.
Well, this is just like, it's relatively simple, but it says like, it gives these different levels and it names each one. The first one's called subliminal intoxication. And that means you have a blood alcohol content of 0.01 to 0.05. And on that level, your reaction time, your behavior, and judgment are slightly altered. The next level they call euphoria, which is a blood alcohol content of 0.03 to 0.12. And on that level, the brain releases more dopamine, and you may feel more relaxed and confident, but your reasoning and your memory become impaired. All right? And then the next level is called excitement, which is a blood alcohol level of 0.09 to 0.25. And that affects the optical lobe and the temporal lobe and the frontal lobe in your brain. And what happens on that level is blurred vision, slurred speech, and impaired hearing, loss of fine motor skills, slower time reaction. And this stage often is often marked by mood swings, impaired judgment, and even nausea and vomiting.
Sounds fun.
Right.
Let's party.
And well, the next level is called confusion, which is a blood alcohol content level of 0.18 to zero point 0.3. And here your cerebellum is impacted. There's difficulty walking or standing. One might experience blackouts or temporary loss of consciousness or short-term memory. And also, and you may also have a higher pain threshold, which can increase your risk to injury. And then the next level is called stupor, 0.25. All mental, physical, and sensory functions are severely impaired. The risk for passing out and suffocation and injury is very high on this level. So here's the point. Where in our ridiculous world, in our ridiculous minds, how did we come up with the idea that if you're not doing this, you're not free? If you're not doing this, you've been inhibited and you're kind of like prudish and not really like getting the most out of life. You know, it's actually a very strange idea. And so for someone, you know, like Devaki, you know, I would say, you know, just say like, well, you know what, I grew up in a way where I learned to be happy without this, you know, where, you know, I don't need this to dance and to sing and to be free. I'm not so inhibited that I need to drink alcohol to come to that level. I can just do it, you know, and I don't need this. And that helps to keep my mind clear and helps me kind of like move towards my, you know, spiritual goals in life. You know, it's a very, we need to be able to look at our own society and see, even though things have been normalized, how strange and really, you know, unnormal they really are.
Sure.
Maybe you could share a little bit for Devaki too.
Nathan Dunday writes, drinking alcohol boosts your confidence and loosens you up in a party. What do you think about that? That's your argument, Kaustubha? I find it very freeing at a party. I find myself more vulnerable. I hug strange men I don't know.
Yeah, so the point is, why do you need alcohol for that?
To hug strange men?
Well, in other words,
too inhibited. I find myself too inhibited.
Yeah, then work on that. But you're saying, well, let me artificially work on that.
Yeah.
So who's the one that's really inhibited then? You know, in other words, if I'm not inhibited, well, then I don't need it. You know?
Sure.
So apparently you're the ones that are inhibited. So my message to you is try some yoga instead.
I like that. You know, another one, Kaustubha, I think is a big one, because we understand, like, there's a reason. You made a great point. There's a reason these ethics are there. It's not just there are religious ethics. No, they enhance our freedom. And so some people will say, well, what's the big deal then? If I have a glass of wine with dinner or 2 glasses of wine with dinner, my doctor recommends it. And I think a good argument to that is it's not just that we are starting a church where we say no to fun. You know, it's the fact that you might be able to have 2 glasses of wine with dinner. But there's a lot of people who can't have 2 glasses of wine. They need 10 glasses of wine. And matter of fact, it may be people that really look up to you. So that's a problem when anybody in this circle has, you know, I just have a drink, big deal. It doesn't control me. It may not control you, but there are people that it does control them. Historically, it's been proven that there are a lot of people that can't control themselves with alcohol, even if you can. And not only can they not control themselves, it will dismantle their entire existence. They'll ruin their life. They'll lose their family. They'll lose everything they own. They'll end up it happens. Historically, sure. There's basements of churches all around America where people meet on Tuesday night to talk about, I just wanted one drink, and it was a big deal. So that's the problem. Whatever we do, we don't do within a snow globe, within a bubble on an island. Whatever we do, there's people taking notes, looking up to us, say, oh, they do that. This is cool to do that. And that's where the problem is. And I'm looking at everybody here as leaders. And we are all leaders in one sense, whether we like it or not. There's people that will look up to us and follow our lead. What do you think about that?
I think your youth of today, did you have like real heavy lyrics about like drinking, like really judgmental?
Yeah,
Tell the truth.
I'm not even saying it judgment. I mean, like I said, I wouldn't. None of my students, I don't tell to don't drink alcohol.
No, I'm
I
talking about. I'm talking
I
about
don't.
youth of today.
Oh, when I was 19, yeah, then I put it put it right in their face.
That's right. All right.
But it
You
was
ready
so
for-
it was sort of like a natural backlash to
Yeah.
like a 19-year-old party culture that
Yeah.
was obviously a little silly.
Right.
And the fact is, it catches up with you. If you're like you're 19, okay, party. 29, party. 39, you're still partying. Come on. 49, your kids are all watching you. It's just it is ridiculous. You know what I mean? If they didn't
Right.
change then, I hope they changed now. You know.
Okay, I got a question for you, Raghunath.
Yeah.
This one's coming from Drew Pagnata.
Drew Pagnata. Sorry about the bad service today, everybody. That's my ongoing problem. I got a bad service attitude. Bad service attitude. Someone said Yvette was here today, and she was calling her friends, and she goes, "Oh, I've got bad service." She's got bad service, and her friend thought she meant, "Oh, you're at the Saba weekend, and they gave you some bad service, like cleaning out the sheep barn." I want to say something about these Sabites here today, this weekend. It was the most externally, materially miserable day yesterday. It was cold and like.
Oh, Rago, there's your bad service. Anyway, I assume he's saying it was cold and rainy and miserable out there, but everyone had a great time because they're doing service. Mara, were you there?
No, I wasn't there, but I heard that it was great.
Okay, but you provided the food, is that right?
I did, yeah. And I stole Sachi to work with me for a wedding that we were going to. So.
All right. Well, we don't have Raghunath here. We're about to read his question, but maybe you need to read another question to me.
Sure. Let's see. Okay, so your next question, Kaustubha, it's coming from Hazim. And he wrote, does a Bhakti Yoga path suggest indifference towards political issues to focus on spiritual life? Or can commitments and interest in political causes and speaking up against systemic inequities coincide with love for Krishna? Does spiritual devotion and activities in service mean slowly renouncing political affiliations and community organizations? Especially with the comments on the Friends and Enemies episode. I wonder how to resolve non-attachment to political outcomes, seeing the super soul within everyone despite their actions, and advocate for a more just world.
Okay, excellent question, Hazim. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Hazim. It's not that he's asking, does the Bhakti Yoga path suggest an indifference towards political issues? I don't think it at all promotes an indifference to it, but it might promote a different approach. Now, I'll say this. I have many friends that practice Bhakti Yoga, and some of them, even like their careers, are directly related to what you could call political causes or social causes. And, that's their daily work. And they have a way of, like, for instance, I have friends that work for even lead organizations that are concerned with climate change. That's what they do, on a 9-to-5 basis, and they're committed to it. It's a cause that they believe in. But what I appreciate, in that service that they do, is that they don't. Well, there's a certain care that they do it with. So it's not that there's an indifference to these things, but the idea is that even like well-intended political movements, they can corrupt us if they're devoid of spiritual knowledge. If we're not clear on spiritual, and we'll talk about what spiritual knowledge means, and it's something that Raghunath and I were talking about throughout the week. You there, Raghu? You back? It looks like he's back, but I still don't hear him yet. But the idea that spiritual knowledge means that underneath all these bodies, we are all made of the same spiritual energy. We are all made of the energy of God, and we're all connected to God. And that means that all of us have been through the male body, the female body, the black body, the white body, the animal body, right? The cow body, the dog body, the elephant body, even the plant body, right? This is called, spiritual knowledge, right? Recognizing the difference between matter and spirit, recognizing the spiritual equality that's common in every living being, despite the material inequalities or the material differences. That's called spiritual knowledge. And when you base a political movement on that, you get a beautiful, powerful movement that can really create some positive change. But even if it's well intended, if there's no spiritual knowledge behind it, then it tends to corrupt us in some way. And and this is the key. If one's really careful to notice this, is that that if that spiritual knowledge isn't there, then there's a tendency for it to become based on anger, right? That one feels anger and even hatred for what they consider to be their opposition. And when we start to operate in that way, we start to, rather than bringing people together and creating healing, we separate people farther apart, right? And we create further harm. So the way that I understand how a Bhakti Yogi most essentially deals with these issues, and let's look at the issues. I mean, here's a list of issues, right? Poverty, homelessness, climate change, racial injustice, misogyny and gender inequality, healthcare, childhood obesity, bullying, animal rights, gun violence, world hunger, child abuse, domestic violence, voting rights, plastics in our oceans, human trafficking, corporate corruption, workers' rights, refugee crisis.
Now I'm fully depressed.
Right? Ageism, criminal justice reform, genetically modified food, indigenous rights, net neutrality, social media privacy, nuclear proliferation. I mean, the list just goes on and on. There are so many serious problems in this world. Now, this is what I learned coming into the world of Bhakti Yoga, is that a picture of a human body, and it's covered in, for everyone that, I don't know how many things I just read, like 30 different things. Picture it being a boil on that body, right? Like a pus-filled, painful, boil on the body. And then you could put all your effort into going through each one and trying to lance it and remove, the pus from it. But if you don't actually get to the blood is actually the cause of all of these problems, right? It's due to an impurity in the blood that's causing all these different boils to grow. So a wise approach would be not just to deal with it on the external level, but to get to the root of the problem, right? Whether you're not eating the right foods, or there's a problem. I don't know so much about health and boils and all. Maybe it's a problem with the liver or something like that, right? But you got to get to the underlying problem. And so what the yoga culture teaches us is that the underlying problem, it's an ignorance or a lack of spiritual knowledge, a lack of us understanding that I'm not this body, a lack of understanding that my happiness is not tied to any external thing. If I can get that, that's called spiritual knowledge. And if I get that, what it does is it addresses every one of these problems, right? It's like addressing the blood for the person that's got 30 boils on their body, right? If I can get that spiritual knowledge, then, because pick any one, right? Poverty. Why is there poverty? Poverty is there because of greed. Why is there greed? Greed is because there's a lack of spiritual knowledge. I think if I don't have more than someone else, I won't be happy. It's a lack of sensitivity and understanding that I need to respect everyone just as I respect my own family members. Everyone should be dear to me, right? I need to worry about the welfare of everyone. That's called spiritual knowledge. So that's poverty. Climate change. It's going to be the same ignorance that's behind that. Racial injustice. It's going to be the same ignorance that's behind that. World hunger, child abuse, voting. It's all ties in to that lack of spiritual understanding. So, the way that I learned to be an activist in this world through Bhakti Yoga is try to elevate, spiritual knowledge in society, right? In whatever big or little way that I can do that. And if people can catch on to this idea, well, then we can address all of these issues, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't be addressed individually. And I appreciate people that dedicate themselves to it. But if they dedicate themselves to it with spiritual knowledge, then they prevent themselves from becoming corrupted and developing the same qualities as the problem that they're addressing, developing hatred and anger and so on, fear, So that's my understanding of how the Bhakti Yogi is addressing social issues or political issues, is that they're doing it with spiritual knowledge. And they're doing it with the idea that ultimately spiritual knowledge is the cure to all of this. You know, there's a nice passage in Raghunath Swami's book, The Journey Within, where he talked about where he's at an airport in Delhi, and he meets a woman who's on a very high level in government dealing with the ecological crisis in India. And she kind of challenges him, like, well, you Swamis, what are you doing for the world? It's like there's all kinds of, ecological crisis, and it's like it's doomsday out there. It's coming on us fast. And then he began to explain that even if we cleaned all the rivers, if we don't clean our hearts, we're just going to turn around and pollute them all again. And so this is while we can, and should deal with these problems individually, none of us can deal with them all individually. Or let me say, the only way that you can deal with them all in one shot is by going right to the root of it. And that's ignorance of spiritual knowledge. So that's my understanding of how we can look at that. All right, Raghu?
Good answer. Good answer.
Okay.
Great
Okay.
answer.
Well, we got 2 questions for you now. We got to get back to Drew's question, right?
Sorry about that. Sorry.
No problem. Hopefully you can stick with us this time.
Yeah. You guys
Okay.
bore me, so I'm out of here.
Then you come
And
back,
meeting.
though.
And
You
meeting.
keep coming back, though, don't you? Okay.
But because I'm needy.
Right. Here's Drew's question. Drew Pagnotta. He says, I'm listening to episode 163.
Oh,
Where-
I love that one.
And one of my favorites is 163. I'm listening to episode 163. What episode is today? It's like 450 or something practically, right?
446, I think.
Meryl,
446.
it rolls out of her mouth. Like she's like, yeah, she's been thinking about it all morning. 446, 446. Good job,
I can't
Meryl. She's
read
like,
slogans, but I know the episode numbers.
she's like making a batter in there.
Okay. I'm listening to episode 163, where a majority of the question and answer show dealt with the material world, whether it be things, stuff, or sex. You had a great analogy.
Things, stuff, or sex.
Like all material things. There's
All
things,
right.
there's stuff. I don't know what the difference between stuff and things are, but sex, I get it. That's different.
Yes, that's a little different.
Okay. So he said, you had a great analogy of a beautiful car that has 4 flat tires. Is that you, Raghu? That's probably
I
you.
can't remember that analogy, but yeah, maybe.
It was a beautiful one, though.
something. Sometimes those analogies just flow out.
Yeah. The fancy car is obsolete without working tires. I get it.
Okay.
But don't we need good tires so they don't wear out as fast? And we shop for a good deal because wealth is also material, but you still have to pay for them, etc. Even Kaustubha's fruit bowl or wall art or new computer or nice microphones to deliver proper audio for your listeners. My question is that as much as I want to practically denounce the material world, don't we need some material things, Raghunath? Don't we? Like if you walked into your home and you have great views of the horizon, sunset, mountains, flowers that make a house smell pleasing, etc. Your home, you'd want a sense of peace and an energy that makes you feel good. Is that all Maya also? Or should we be happy living in a house that has bare walls or something like that? How do you balance wants, needs, and what really matters?
Great question, Drew. Sounds like you're in a lot of Maya.
Okay.
No, just kidding. Well, the thing about bhakti is it's just the opposite of what you're saying. It's not it's not renouncing the material world. It's seeing that the material world all belongs to Krishna. And we become like this alchemist that whatever we use, that thing will either implicate us in problematic life or implicate us towards freedom or moksha or bhakti. And everything is like that. I find that I have the steering wheel in my hands. And whatever gets put in my hands, I can use my computer. I'm looking at my computer right now for a pornography addiction. Ruins people's lives. They get into, computer porn, financially, mentally, destroys their intimacy in the relationship. You can use that computer for something like that. Or Kaustubha, we get to use this computer to talk about the Bhagavatam. You can use the computer to uplift you. The computer itself isn't evil. It was made by God. In one sense, it's all one. You hear that people say that a lot. It's all one. It is all one, but in this material world, it can go either way. And the analogy Prabhupada would use is it's like electricity. It can freeze something in a freezer or heat something in an oven. Electricity can be moved either way. We have to be those alchemists that take things of this material world and use them to bring us higher. If you want a great view, I think it's great to have a great view. I mean, I find that my consciousness is best when I'm in a place where I can be peaceful, where I can be happy. I don't think that's an evil thing. If I'm going to use my, now, here's an interesting point though. You can use a lot of good things, natural things, healing things of this material world also for your ego, right? I can do yoga for my ego. I can do a pancha karma 30-day khichdi cleanse for my ego, right? To be like super healthy so I can use my body to just manipulate people. So even things of organic nature or natural things in nature can still be used for the ego. And it becomes like a delicate, I find that in my life, these things get presented on my path more and more. And sometimes I find myself, okay, I want to get out of the city. I want to go to the country. I remember when I was moving out of Los Angeles, moving into the country in upstate New York, I was happy. And I felt like good. I needed to get into the country. It's good for me. It's healthy for me. Then Raghunath Swami wanted me to come to New York City. And I didn't really want to be in New York City. But Krishna just made that arrangement. And even though I didn't want to be there, I did it because I wanted to serve a higher purpose there. And so there is sort of both materially good and bad things. And then there's spiritual things that are above the material good and bad. As far as things of this world, how we use them is going to sort of make us or break us. And it's really got not that much to do with the things themselves. What'll naturally happen on your spiritual path, you'll start to get rid of the things that are purely for your ego. And you'll realize this is of so little value. You know, I told that story on Joe Rogan, I think, when I had that really expensive record collection. And then I read something from the Srimad Bhagavatam, quoted by Shivananda or something, that where is your pleasure coming from? Is it coming from the joy of your existence, or is it coming from something to do with your ego? And I started to think of my joy. This is when I was like 18. And I was thinking of my joy, and I think, yeah, I have this really valuable record collection. How do I get pleasure out of a record collection? Do I play? I don't even play these. Anybody remember records? You don't play them. If you have rare records, you didn't play them. You put everything on cassette, because if you play them, they could warp, they could skip. So I kept them all very pristine in plastic cases. And I thought, well, where is the pleasure from? Well, it is in the music, but the music's on cassette. Oh, I know. The pleasure came from when other record collector friends of mine would come over and see my boxes and volumes of different pressings and different colored vinyls and things like that. My whole life, joy, my biggest joy, is all in my stupid record collection. And once I heard that statement, are you getting it from your ego? Are you getting it from the way you live, the way you treat people, etc.? I started realizing, wow, it's just for my ego. And because I was at a place in my life where I realized the ego actually gives you problems. It's going to be your biggest hurdle. And I started reevaluating things. And all those records that were very valuable, I considered almost immediately, these are worthless. And so, yeah, and I think naturally we start to lose a little bit of attachment to those things that were just our ego, because they realize it's not going to serve me on this path. I'm not above it. Just wanted to say, I'm not above that. I still like things for my ego. I'm not above that. But that's what we did as monks. We had to get rid of you get rid of all your accoutrements, and you're left with nothing. And there's accoutrements. You know, we're all wearing the same clothes. It's not like my dhoti's cooler than your dhoti. You know, we're wearing crappy watches and Birkenstocks, walking around at best. Yes. That make any sense?
So yeah, you tend to simplify, but it's not that you have to live in a bare house.
Yeah, you tend to simplify, and yeah, and use stuff for your service. Or otherwise, it's just going to complicate your life. Again, these aren't like our religious principles. These are just helpful guides. I think the way other spiritual paths, and maybe even this path, are presented, like you got to do this, you can't do that, but you got to do this, and you can't do that. It's like, oh, all these rules and hoops I got to jump through. They're all there for our benefit, for our peace of mind, to help us sit and meditate. You don't have to do any of them. You don't have to follow any of them. But it just makes it a little harder.
None of them?
None of them. None.
Whoa.
Join me for my new religion.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Is that what's going on up there, Super Soul Farm?
I'm just making up stuff.
You don't need these rules.
Be your own guru and listen to me. But then you're the guru. Yes. I'm teaching them to be their own guru.
All right, Raghu.
All right.
Should you hit me or should I hit you for second one?
Just slap me. That's what you're thinking.
This is coming from. I'm going to slap you with a Stephanie Solelegy.
Oh,
question.
Solele.
Yeah, Stephanie Solelegy from Texas. She asks, "I'm feeling like I need the guidance of a spiritual master, and it has started to pull on me like a really urgent thing." Okay.
All right.
Previously, yeah, exciting. Previously, I thought, I'll just keep on working at getting to 16 rounds, chanting 16 rounds of japa meditation, following the regulative principles, and then once I'm chanting 16 for some time, the right person will become obvious. But now I'm feeling like I need the shelter of a senior devotee whom I can ask questions to and have a personal relationship with. Not in a call you every day kind of way.
Can I call you?
But just for important spiritual issues, and who understands my life with a family. And then she said, I think I have found this person.
Ah.
Okay. Also, I don't think I will ever get to 16 rounds without a lot of grace through the strength of the parampara. Have you seen this to be true? One's rounds become easier after they have taken shelter of a guru? How do I repay the enormous debt from all that may be given to me from a spiritual master and to all the influential devotees in my life, including yourselves? I have learned so much from you both, and I'm very grateful. Oh, Stephanie's so nice.
You can repay Kaustubha by paying it forward. You can repay me through Bitcoin or other types of cryptocurrency. Oh, that was a great question, Soleli G. So this is what happens when you start to go down this rabbit hole. You get more and more serious about your spiritual life. And she wants to make like a commitment to a teacher. It's exciting to read this email, actually.
Let me get the first part of her question.
Okay.
So she's saying, I have this, and just to put this in context for people that may not understand, in following this yoga path, it's a particular lineage, and one of the ways that it's followed is that when one feels a certain level of commitment, then they're initiated by a guru, and that their relationship is formalized through that ritual. And at that point, the guru, asks the student to take vows. One of them being to chant 16 rounds of japa means meditating for roughly 2 hours a day. And so Stephanie's saying, I want that guru, but at the same time, I don't think I can chant for 2 hours a day.
Sure.
And she's saying, once you get initiated, does it suddenly become easier to do that? That was her first question.
That's a good question. I think it's not. I don't think it's necessarily a mystical thing, but it could be. I think you just get very, very, very focused, and you become expert at time management because you start to reprioritize your life. I'm serious about.
Let's say one thing first, right?
Yeah.
We know lots of people that have taken that vow and have had trouble maintaining it.
For sure.
So I don't think there's something mystically changes and suddenly it becomes easy.
Yeah. You have to make the time. I mean, I can say for myself, I like to chant 10 rounds before I do anything in the day. It's just that just sort of like knocks out more than half. But it is a commitment, and and some people say, well, why so many rounds? Truthfully, it just sets the bar high. because I have a tendency to set the bar lower. So when you have sometimes you fall short, but you're jumping high, and I think that's a great thing. And I think you're also going to be surprised too. It's hard with kids. She's a mom, right? Of many.
Yeah.
Mom of many. And you know what? Here's the deal. If you have that relationship and you don't get initiated, the initiation will come in time. The commitment's already there in your heart, and you have a relationship with a person who's giving you advice. And it's not necessarily one singular person that lifts us higher. It's generally this guru varga, this guru clan, a group of gurus or teachers that God sends to us to bring us higher. It's not necessarily always one person, but I will say in my life, I've got a small handful. And with that, I find good advice. I find good instruction. I find someone to lean on when I'm suffering. I find they on a regular basis, I can listen to them, and I feel a little lighter in my life. So it's great if Krishna has given you that connection, but there also will be maybe even a team of people that Krishna sends for you to lift you up. And sometimes, like if you're dealing with a family issues, but your teacher is a sannyasi who's never been married or now doesn't have children, you might go to another person who you trust their integrity and the way they live and ask them questions about something like that a sannyasi wouldn't necessarily give advice on or have that insight on. They might just say, oh, just have the kids chant 16 rounds. It should work out fine. Sometimes they'll say, just take shelter of another person who's married and has kids and has to deal with these same things.
I think, example, you take Gauravani, right, who was like, he had a relationship with Raghunath Swami as his guru for many years, but he never quite felt like he was ready to carry out that vow of chanting 16 rounds a day. And and he waited, and then when he felt like I'm ready to do it, then he took initiation. Right?
Yeah, but it was not that long ago. I mean, 6 years ago, maybe. Because you get born in a devotee, you have a devotee name. So sometimes people say, I just want a name.
Yeah, that's so important.
Yeah. The important thing is that commitment in the heart. Was there another question?
So the first one was, does it become easier once you do that? The second part of it was, how do you repay that enormous debt to the guru?
Okay. Yeah, of course you can never repay. I'm writing my book right now, so I'm going through all people have touched my heart, and you get really appreciative of not only the people, but how God sends certain people to you. And it's incredibly moving when you actually start really, oh yeah. And then this person came, and I remember this day I was struggling, and I remember this person comforted me, and my mind was like a blazing forest fire, and this person came to me like a rain cloud, saving my heart, which was suffering tremendously. And it's great to remember those things because it really puts you in that mood of gratitude. How can I ever pay those people back? You can't pay them back. What you can do is you give that to other people. You become tolerant and loving and compassionate towards people. And I remember my state of being when I first met people practicing bhakti. My brain was all over the place. I was a little rude and offensive, and they just tolerated me. Tolerate, love, compassion. Those three things: tolerate, love, and compassion. That's what they gave me. And now you're asked to do it to other people. That's how you pay it back, because people are intolerant or intolerable, I find, and I have to be tolerant. People do stupid things, and I have to be compassionate. People act hateful, and I have to be loving. So tolerance, compassion, love have been given to me. I pay it back by being tolerant, compassionate, and loving with others.
I like that.
So Lally G, go.
Right.
All right. What's question for you, sir? Anonymous?
Yeah.
Was that it?
Yep.
Anonymous. Okay. I've been trying to nourish and develop my connection with Krishna these past few months. I use every chance I get to keep him in my thoughts. I prepare and offer my meals with love. I do 1 round of japa a day and listen to the podcast and Patreon every chance I get. Sounds good.
Yeah.
It sounds like they're doing good.
All right, Anonymous. Way to go.
I know. Something that's been on my mind, though, for quite a while was the flavor of my relationship with
Krishna, my rasa, right? The more I look at his form and think about it, the more attracted I find myself to his features. To give some background, I'm heterosexual male in a wonderful, fulfilling relationship with my wife-to-be. Sounds like this person is perfect.
What's the problem here?
What's the problem? My partner knows about my practices. I've gushed to her about Krishna at least once a week for God knows how long. Despite being Christian, she is extremely supportive of it and is one of my main sources of inspiration when I seek to strengthen my connection with the Lord. Having said that, I haven't shared with her these specific thoughts because it's a bit too much. First of all, I have no idea how she'd take it. And second, I really am not sure how based I am in these feelings of attraction to Krishna as my partner. I should say that there's nothing scary or bothersome about these thoughts for me. I just take them as they come. It's actually more confusing than anything because in all the episodes of the podcast, I fail to remember any homosexual relationships mentioned, much less involving Bhagavan. My question is this: is it okay to be gay for Krishna? That's a good one. It's an honor and a privilege to be part of this community. I thank you both for the constant guidance you provide in my life. Signed, Anonymous via email.
Okay.
That's the takeaway today, Mara. Hashtag gay for Krishna.
Well, it's obviously like a question that's on the esoteric side of bhakti practice, right? For people that are unfamiliar with this, the idea is that, once you master yoga, right? Like once you've gained control of your mind and gained control of your senses and develop a certain inner peace and all of that, what the Bhakti path is saying is then that's just opens the door. That's really just like where everything opens up to a personal relationship with God. And in this particular tradition, it goes into great detail of all the different varieties of the way one may relate to God. And what it's also saying is that the relationships that we have in this world, it's not like they disappear, but it's that we can recognize that these are almost like reflections of the relationships that take place in the spiritual realm. So whereas in this world, we have a relationship, like for instance, there's a relationship of friendship, or there's a relationship of like parental love, or there's the relationship of like love between, like romantic love. It's saying that those also exist on a spiritual level, and you can have those varieties of love for God, eternally. And that's where yoga ultimately leads. So what this person's asking is, they're saying, when I meditate on and I think about Krishna, I think he's so beautiful. And is that like a homosexual feeling that I'm having for that person? And is that encouraged or allowed, or or how do I understand that? And so let me share this: is that this esoteric side of bhakti is something that to enter it and to really understand it, you have to be able to let go of all our material understanding or material attachments. In other words, we move through this world with different sets of egos, right? Different mindsets that are based on our body. Like someone may identify as being male, right? And when I'm passing through this male body, I'm thinking I'm a man, right? And there's certain ways that I won't dress, for instance, as a man, right? And there's certain interests that I'll take up as a man, and certain interests that I'll kind of like won't embrace as a man, right? Because I identify as a man, right? But then again, back to spiritual knowledge. What spiritual knowledge is saying, but then when you leave that body and you enter a new body, and let's say that body's female, well, now you dress a different way, and you speak a different way, and you have different interests, likely based on that. And so, am I a man? Am I a woman? What am I? Well, from the spiritual perspective, we realize in the material world, we're going through all these different identities, and that my relationship with God in the eternal realm has nothing to do with these temporary roles and temporary egos that I'm embracing. So if you're in a male body now, but you have no hang-ups, right? You can understand that in a mature way we can discuss this. That someone in a male body now may say, you know what? I desire to be Krishna's lover, as a female in the spiritual realm, right? And there's evidence of this. There's examples of this that you can read about. Do you know the example I'm going to give, Raghunath? Raghu, you there?
Yeah, I'm not frozen. I'm just in meditation.
Okay. Krishna's form.
I can't think off the top of my head. What do you got?
The sages of Danya Karanya,
Oh yeah.
right? So when Lord Ram, who is an avatar of Krishna, was living in the forest with Sita, there were sages that lived in that forest. Now, these sages were like deeply spiritual people that they were in male bodies, but they weren't hung up with male ego. They weren't homosexual or like, you think like if someone, like a modern scholar were going to write on this. You see, because what happened was when they saw Ram with Sita, they recognized the beauty and the intimacy of their relationship, right? The depth of the love being shared there. And when they saw that, they said, to be able to serve God and to have an eternal relationship with God with this type of intimacy, well, that's just like, what could be higher than that? What could be more beautiful than that? What could be a better way to serve than that? And so they desired to have that type of relationship with God. But in the form of Ram only takes on one lover, right? And that's Sita. So what they did was that in their meditations, they prayed that when Krishna appears as Krishna, where he takes on many, many lovers, that they could be those lovers. And Srila Prabhupada writes about this in the book, The Nectar Devotion, and I'll read just a paragraph from it. He says, this development of conjugal love for Krishna is not manifested in women only. The material body has nothing to do with spiritual loving affairs, right? Because I'm in a male body or female body, that has nothing to do with my eternal relationship. A woman may develop an attitude for becoming a friend of Krishna. And similarly, a man may develop the feature of becoming a gopi in Vrindavan, one of Krishna's female lovers in Vrindavan. How a devotee in the form of a man can desire to become a gopi is stated in the Padma Purana as follows. So this is the Nectar Devotion quoting, the Padma Purana. In the days gone by, there were many sages in Dandakaranya. Dandakaranya is the name of a forest where Lord Ramachandra lived after being banished by his father for 14 years. At that time, there were many advanced sages who were captivated by the beauty of Lord Ramachandra and who desired to become women in order to embrace the Lord. Later on, these sages appeared in Goloka Vrindavan when Krishna advented himself there, and they were born as gopis, or girlfriends of Krishna. In this way, they attained perfection of spiritual life. So, yeah, if we're mature, we can understand that my body here in this world, I'm neither man nor woman or whatever. I go through these different things, and to some level externally, I adopt that ego of that body. But on a higher level, I'm understanding that I'm not this body and that I can have any different kind of relationship with God in the spiritual realm. So I wanted to share that first, and I think that hopefully largely answers the question. But I also wanted to say this, is that understanding what our eternal relationship with Krishna will be is something that is revealed to one on a very high level of the practice of bhakti, a very high level. And it's not that we should be too concerned with how that's going to manifest in our early practicing. And if I consider myself someone that's been practicing this for decades, I know that I'm nowhere near that being revealed to me, right? Like we're through chanting the names of God, through my meditation on the names of God, it arises in me that svarupa or that the nature of my personal relationship with God will arise in me. And it has nothing to do with even what my attractions and so on might be right now. So this is interesting to think about. There are 5 different rasas, or 5 different varieties that are written about. And it says that as you go through them, each one, there's an addition of something. The analogy is given just like you have earth, water, fire, air, and ether. These are 5 material ingredients. And as you go backwards, each one adds another aspect to it. Like, for instance, in ether, sound is carried, right? In air, there's sound, but there's also the feeling of touch. You can feel the air, right? And in fire, there's sound, and you can feel it, hopefully not too close. You can feel the warmth coming from it. And but you can also see it, right? And then with water, you can also taste it. And it has everything that the ones before had. And ultimately, earth has them all plus smell. And so with the different rasas, the first rasa is called Shantaras. And that means that it's not even active service, but it's just a deep appreciation with awe for God. And then the next one is called Dasyaras. And I should say this, in Shantaras, the primary quality is attachment to God, right? I feel attached to God. I want to always think of God. And I want to always stay, I have a detachment from material things and attachment to God. And then the next rasa is the rasa of servitude. I want to serve God like I'm God's servant. Just like you may really respect someone and serve them, right? And so there, it has that same attachment to God, but added to that is the idea of I want to serve. And then there's the relationship of friendship, which has that service and the attachment, but it also has a sense of intimacy. Like, it's not that God is superior to me, but we're like on an equal level, because that facilitates that intimacy. And then the next level is called Vatsalya, is parental love. And in that one, it has all the qualities of the previous ones, but it has even a sense of superiority, like I'm maintaining God. That there's that feeling, that ultimately one can even control God on that level with their devotion. And then in conjugal love, the love of a lover, it has all those previous ones, but it has increased intimacy. And so this is the point. What are we capable of focusing on in a practical way in our current condition where we're still full of material attachments? What we really focus on is that dasya rasa, the mood of a servant, right? If we really embrace the mood of a servant, that God is great and my duty is to serve, and through that service I find complete fulfillment, and let me embrace that attitude of a servant. If we can fully embrace that attitude, then that service runs straight through it. That mood of service is still there, even in the conjugal ras, even in the mood of the lovers. So let us cultivate what we can cultivate right now. That's in a real, genuine, authentic way. And then through the depth of our meditation, eventually, and by the grace of God, the specific relationship that we have will be revealed to us. But that's much further down the line. And that's something that we hope for and that we pray for. Okay, Raghu, you back?
Beautiful.
I think we're out of time.
I think that's it, brother.
All right.
We're going to dive into some Super Soul Seva today.
All right,
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Oh, we're just cutting, chopping, burning, the usual.
Cutting, chopping, and burning. All right.
Great to see everybody.
Now we're at 8 o'clock still tomorrow, correct?
8 o'clock. 8 o'clock. Memorial Day. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We're looking forward to seeing all the Californians that have signed up. We got a big posse in California. And if you haven't signed up for New York yet, 2 weeks from now, we're all in New York. We're taking the show on the road. Looking forward to seeing everybody. Thanks for everybody who support us here. We're trying to do Sweet Baby Krishna as much as possible. Mara gets it out on that thread, on that WhatsApp thread and the Discord thread. But I'm on a marathon, Kaustubha. Sweet Baby Krishna, reading through the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam.
Awesome.
And yeah, it's good for me. I need it. I'm doing it for me. I'm selfish. I need it. But if you want to join on, that's on our Patreon account, patreon.com/Wisdom of the Sages. Join us, support us. We're grateful. Thank you very much. Now, put your hands in the sky and start to dance.